Welcome, travelers, to my realm of nightmares. Allow me to be your personal assistant. Come in, take a seat, get comfortable. For when you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.
I've always preferred my own company. I guess I've always viewed other people as the enemy. I was the same way in school, and I guess this is what affected my performance. I was never really comfortable in class, surrounded by my peers. I never exactly felt at ease. After 6 years, I left with results that did me a little justice, and I know that when thinking about it, it comes down to my aversion to all things social. Of course, this just made things like that a little bit harder when it came to finding a job. I had jobs, but none which I could really consider my own. I spent a few weeks stacking shelves, a month or so in an office, and one long summer, so many years ago, I sold insurance plans from a call center. Each time the position was fleeting. I was either not front of the house material, I was not approachable, or I was simply not that good. Fancy that, being told that you are not good enough to sell insurance. Each time I failed, each time a position did not work out, I naturally did what I found most comfortable. I drifted. I drifted from job to job, from home to home, desperately seeking out my place within a world that I felt so desperately separated from. Money for bills became money for booze. Time and work became time at home. I quickly found that my anchor, which I used to have in life, had somehow become detached, washed away, and submerged beneath the waves of time. And it was at this point that I first saw the advert. Unique position offered for unique individual. Night Watchmen required urgently. 5 nights a week. The ability to work under your own initiative is a must, as this is a solitary work role. Submit your CV today for consideration. Solitary? That word leapt out from the page. I could be alone? I reasoned. I am alone anyway, I thought. What is the worst that could happen? Little did I know that the advert was a lie. There would be no solitude offered during those cold December nights, stuck inside the empty and barren halls of Drayton Pass. The hospital was once a monument, a beacon of hope constructed hundreds of years ago to help tackle the growing epidemic of the plague. It had once been proud, it had once been clean, but now it was no more than decay. Its uses had diminished when the outbreak subsided, so it had been repurposed to assist those with mental health issues. Unfortunately, though, the affliction of the mind was not completely understood back then, which meant that it was nothing more than a place to hide all society's ills. I had researched the building prior to my first night. I did know of the horrors concealed within the history of its walls, but Drayton Pass was just an empty building now. At least, that was what I thought. I moved slowly up the darkened halls towards the building as the harsh winds and rain lashed at my face. Drayton Pass stood tall and foreboding ahead, its black and empty windows concealing its horrific history quite nicely from anyone who would happen to pass. Not that anyone would pass. The hospital was at least 5 miles from anywhere, and it was completely concealed by the forest of tall trees which surrounded it. During its early years, it would have been suited perfectly to serve as a small town of Drayton, located just down the hill. With the birth of the Industrial Revolution, the town had suffered greatly. Families moved to the big city in search of work, and eventually, the once flourishing town was reduced to a shell of its former self. As I neared the old metal gate, I noticed my new boss waiting patiently just outside. "You took your time," he sighed, pulling his coat tighter around his body. "Never mind. Just call me if you see anything. Not that you will, of course. Drayton is a peaceful place, James. She will take care of you. Enjoy your stay." With that, he handed me a big set of keys and turned to leave, disappearing into the blackness of the night. Welcome to Drayton Pass. The hours came and went fairly quickly. The building had been stripped and torn apart, some of the damage taking place over the years, but the vast majority of it coming from the ongoing refurbishment. The builders had now all finished for the winter, and would not be returning until the new year. Various tools and ladders remained still in the silent rooms, and the windows rattled in their rusted frames. Thankfully, the room, which would become my post, was well furnished, and contained a radio, which was more than I could have hoped for. My role was simple. I was to watch. What exactly was I to watch? Wasn't clear. I assumed, like most buildings under construction, I would be guarding it against drunks and addicts, looking for a place to spend the night. Realistically, it would probably just be kids looking to explore an old, creepy building at night. It didn't matter, though. No one would be making the trip to Drayton Pass tonight. Not within this storm. I was all alone tonight, and that was exactly how I liked it. I look up at the small clock above the door. It says 3:13 in the morning. The noise of the storm outside was comforting. The sound of the rain as it struck against the roof was peaceful. The noise bled beautifully into a lullaby, which hung heavily on my eyelids. The room was warm, and the radio played quietly in the background. I leant back in my chair and allowed my eyes to close. I could sleep. It was just me. I was alone. Suddenly, the sound of the radio crackling forced my eyes to open. The small radio hissed for a second, before continuing on with its song. But then, after a few more seconds, it hissed again. Slightly annoyed, I pushed myself to my feet. What the hell is wrong with this thing? I moved in and picked the radio up. As I did, the song completely stopped, and the room filled with nothing but the abrasive noise. I sighed and began to fiddle with the dials. As I did, the static cut out for a second. I moved the dials again. As I did, a sound could be heard coming through the speaker. I moved the dial again. As I did, a single word cut through the harshness of the static, piercing the vicious noise and shattering my naive illusion of solitude. It was clear, and it was precise, but more importantly, it was my name. My heart began to beat faster as my hands shook. After a few seconds, my fingers became numb, and the radio slipped from my grasp. It fell from my hands, crashing loudly against the floor as it shattered into pieces. And then, I just stood, frozen on the spot, wrapped in nothing but the silence and the emptiness of Drayton Pass. After a few moments, the night would only get worse. The sound of a bucket being kicked over somewhere down the hall caused me to jump on the spot. I scurried to retrieve the torch from the table and I brought its beam up quickly, illuminating the hall just outside of the open door to my room. The hall seemed to extend further than it had before, almost seeming longer and much more dangerous than the first time I had moved through it. The light from my torch lit the walls, highlighting their age as its paint visibly flaked in chunks. I moved the beam down, the filthy and cracked tiles gleaming brightly, and then I moved the beam up, focusing the light down the end of the hall in front of me. In the darkness, just within sight, a bucket rolled out from an open doorway before sitting silently in the center of the corridor, about 20 meters or so away. The air suddenly felt different. The mood had changed. Within the rotten recesses of Drayton Pass, the arteries of corridors and hallways which lined the decrepit old building were once home to nothing but the spiders, but tonight the mood had changed. The air was thick and the smell of old wood was almost suffocating. It enveloped me as I stood there, shaking, choking the life from my lungs, while stifling my breath. I do not know how, and I do not know why, but I just felt as if something wrong awaited me somewhere down the hallway, hidden in the darkness and concealed by the shadows. My legs trembled as my heart threatened to burst from my chest. The mood had changed. "Calm down, you idiot!" I struggled to slow my breathing as my mind raced. "It's just some kids. Do your bloody job." After a few moments, I managed to collect my thoughts, and I turned and retrieved my handheld radio from the table by the door. I took a few deep breaths, steadied my hand slightly, and then I walked out into the darkness. I could see the bucket. It had somehow managed to end up perfectly in the center of the hallway. I moved the beam of light to the right of it, locating the open doorway from where it had rolled from. "Hello?" I said, my words bouncing from each tight and claustrophobic wall. "Is there anyone there?" Silence. In the distance, I could hear the rain as it continued to pelt the archaic roof above me. "Hello?" A flash of lightning struck outside, briefly blessing the darkness with its white glare. "Is there anybody there?" I realized that my hand had begun to tremble. The beam of light from my torch danced with a spasm over the open doorway. I was sucking at the air, even though I could no longer feel my lungs. "Hello?" Slowly, I took a few more steps towards the open doorway. I could see slightly through the crack in the hinges, but all that was on the other side was more darkness. I took another few steps. As my heart strained, "You're not supposed to be in here," I whispered softly, secretly hoping my words would go unheard. "So, just come out, please." I stopped just short of the door. I gazed through the opening, looking into the blackness, looking into my soul. For a long time, nothing happened. I did not move, and nothing came charging from the void to harm me. The rain felt as if it had stopped, and time now seemed to slow to almost a grinding halt. Nothing is there. No one is there. Suddenly, a hiss from my radio shattered the silence. The static was there again. I willed my hand to move as I retrieved the handset from my pocket, bringing it up to my face to listen. Through the static, through the burst of noise, I could hear it. It was a voice. Without thinking, my finger clicked down on the button, and I spoke aloud. "Hello?" Almost immediately, the dark and demonic voice responded,
"James."
And that is when the sound started. It was metal on metal. The sneering and sharp sound that you would expect if you'd run a blade against another. It tore and it pierced the night, burning through any notion of silence, while filling my body with an unfathomable dread. My blood boiled hot as my arms shook. It was coming from the room. I could not move. All that I could do was stare stupidly into the nothingness before me as the noise grew in intensity. It ripped and cut at the air, defiling the halls with its sick and nasty nature. Tears formed in my eyes as my hands tightened around my torch. The voice crackled through the radio, its unnatural tone slicing dirty through the static.
Welcome home.
My mind throbbed as the horror continued to unfold all around me. The walls felt as if they were moving closer so quickly, threatening to trap me within for all of eternity. All reason and all logic has escaped me as the voice began to chuckle. Its guttural laugh through the hiss of the noise, and all that I could manage to do was to stare stupidly ahead. Gradually, in the blackness of the room in front of me, I began to make out something. There was one, and then there were two bright eyes, as clear as day. They were looking at me, staring at me, consuming me. Even though I could make out no mouth, I knew that it was smiling.
James.
I dropped the radio and ran. I cannot recall the winding path which led me out, only that it did eventually lead me back into the cold wetness of December. And it was here that I remained for the rest of the night, tears soaking my eyes, while the night drenched my face. I could not process what had happened to me. I mean, after all, what had happened to me? There was so much left unanswered, so many questions swirled through my mind, and nothing could calm me. Hours passed, and I never even moved. The sun finally blessed the morning sky with its warm and welcoming glory. Through the haze of confusion, I just about managed to spot my manager moving up the hill towards me. He will not understand. He will not believe you. "Morning, James. How was your first night?" His lips struggled to move as my words spoke for themselves. "It was fine, sir. It was fine." I somehow knew that I had to come back. I did not know where the feeling had come from or what it even meant. I just knew it was there. It had always been there, deep within my heart, hidden by years of drifting and decades of hiding. It was there. I would be coming back. I would be seeing Drayton again. After all, how could I not? I was finally home. Tonight's story was written by the amazing and talented Raymond Beaman. If you like what you heard, please do check him out. His link will be in the description below. Also, I want to give a huge thank you to AK Phoenix for helping me with the sound effects in tonight's video. All of her links will be in the description below. Please check out her merch store. She just recently had an avatar created by Yeah Man. Also, I now have merch. If you would like to walk around representing my realm and gathering me new travelers, the links will be in the description below. I would also like to say thank you to my lovely Patreons. 242 Reads, Rando Calrissian, Silver Threads, Pam, Seraphine, the Midnight Bard, and Hair-Raising Narratives. If you would like to join these lovely travelers by the light of my fire and become a Patreon as well, the links will be in the description below. The support is always appreciated, but never expected.
But as always, travelers, once you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.